Hi everybody, it's the CCJT Amateur Hour. Production value goes to values. Oh man, where production values go to dice. Clap two. Okay.
Take two.
Do you know who that is? That's CC over there.
Hi, that's JT.
We're having a morning this.
Oh yeah.
We're having adventures this morning. Anyway, what we'd like to do is welcome you to the Home Building Network, where we have been doing modifications to our home, or especially in our kitchen, where we've decided to add a certain odor to it to make things smell better.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
You're so kind.
I am. So
Yes,
we have a certain.
I spilled coffee this morning.
It smells wonderful in there.
I spilled an entire fresh cup of coffee this morning.
It
What a waste. What a
wonderful.
tragedy. An absolute tragedy.
Yeah.
But I made myself a fresh cup, so.
But it smells wonderful in there.
Tim Hortons in a Jack cup.
Yeah, our laundry smells wonderful too, by the way. So it is what, February 9th?
9th, yes.
For those who observe this most sacred event, it is Super Bowl Sunday, where the Eagles and Chiefs will be battling for the Lombardi Trophy. Whoopee. And while I'm going to go ahead online saying I want the Eagles to win because I'm pretty sure that the Chiefs are going to be pulling it out because, once you learn how to win, it's really hard not to win. And the Chiefs, they've gotten a lot of grief this season because they keep winning by one score. But that's a win.
That's all it takes.
And and as they say in sports, there's a sports metaphor: winning solves everything. So whatever's going on behind the scenes, or on the field, or in the locker room, or whatever, with the Chiefs, they just keep winning. I think they only lost 2 total games this year, and one was because they had the second and third string in for their last game. So it's like you can't beat winning. But the Eagles have Shaquan, and so it's like we'll see. But I'm thinking it's going to probably be the Chiefs game.
I'm not that invested in football, so I'm going to say the Chiefs because the Chiefs, and they're a super fan.
Yeah. The most important prop bet, which are these side bets, is will there be more or less 6 appearances by Taylor on the screen?
I am sure there will be a lot of reaction shots if Travis does something. They're going to cut to Taylor.
Yep. Travis, of course, is a tight end for the Chiefs and her boyfriend. So I'm sure if he gets into the tight end zone, then,
Not to bring politics into this, but someone else is going to be at the game as well.
We're moving on now.
But there is an over-under on which one of them is going to get more attention at the game. So there's going to be a lot to look at. Honestly, I don't really care either way. Used to watch it for the commercials because the commercials were, when our kids were home and they were little, we made a big Super Bowl party out of it. It was always a lot of fun. Put a tablecloth on the floor with some snacks and we'd sit there and talk through the game, but we'd laugh at the commercials. So don't even get that anymore because they show all the commercials first.
Yeah,
it's not the same thing.
And it doesn't make sense that they don't do it during their President's Weekend, because this is an ideal game for President's Weekend. You have the Super Bowl on Sunday, you give Monday recovery day. But that just doesn't make sense. But okay.
Anyway, enough Super Bowl.
So we usually open up the podcast with current events, but we don't really have a lot of current events. Our business is, chugging along. We're working on the inventory. When you go out to our business website, we have an online bookstore, which we opened recently, just a week before last. Very proud of that, very happy of that we have that. But if you, what are you looking for?
Right here behind me, we have a bookshelf with inventory.
Yeah.
So a copy, or I think we have about 5 copies of each of our paperbacks.
Yeah.
We're still waiting for a few of them. This one isn't in stock just yet because it will be releasing on February 28th.
Yeah.
But right over here we have the 2 more books inventory area, which it's small at the moment. This is one of your first books.
That is my first book.
Didn't you have another one before this?
No, that's my very first book.
Okay, so you took down the second book?
It was the second book.
Okay, anyway. This is political. Duties faithfully executed, but we have a variety of books, paperbacks. We will be happy to autograph them to you if you want to go through that process. So, but behind me, where we're sitting right now, is our little inventory area.
Yeah, and it's so the online bookstore is up, and as CC wisely said, we will autograph, and if you're in the Carson City, Reno Sparks area, we will deliver. And if you want to like meet over coffee, we can talk about book development, we can talk about writing, we can talk about anything you want because we're happy to talk. We're just having kind of fun here. So,
Yep.
And on the writing front, I'm in a pause mode right now. I'm in a major pause mode. Serving Salvation Book 2 is almost ready to go to the next round of editing, and we're going to talk about editing. But right now, what I'm doing is I'm doing the deep dive into Your VC Romance, spending several hours a day going through there doing the content editing, which some of y'all might be calling developmental editing or something like that. Again, we're going to get into this. And it is, candidly, it's stressful because, well, it's you.
Well, yes, it's stressful because we know each other very well. I read JT's books. I think probably JT is a little bit more detailed about editing, content editing, whereas I'm more laid back, and if it makes sense to me, I think that's fine. But so I think we both have very different editing styles.
And we're going to talk about that when we get into the main subject of this. But as for continuing on, current events, we really don't have that much more than that. We're just sort of paused right now while I get through this, because once I give it back to you, you're going to be doing that, and then
I'll be doing more work.
Then I will be doing the final run through Finding Salvation Book 2, and then moving on to Finding Salvation Book 3 to get that out there and close out that series.
And we should say that we did have a couple of things happen recently. Was last Sunday, I believe, we went to a writers group meeting.
Right.
The Sierra Arts Foundation. We had a very fun exercise there where everybody did a little writing, and then we had to read our writing to the group. So I thought that was enjoyable. And JT joined me for this meeting, so that was a lot of fun. Also, JT's books were available at Brouhaha, and it sounds like they did pretty well.
Yeah.
They sold a few books. So not every author sold, but it is... it seems to be very subjective. It was the books that are available through the Depot Bookstore Gallery. So if you did not go to Brouhaha, you can go to Sparks, Nevada to find those books. So we did have some things happen, and we're kind of in the lull in between the next round of events.
Yeah, but we'll be winding up on those pretty soon. Hopefully when we meet again next Sunday, I will have done the edits and we can talk about that. And for the year, we have some wonderful ideas that may include the Sierra Arts Foundation. We're still germinating on those, so we hope we will be reaching out to Tia. We'll be reaching out to Tia and Naomi and to be talking and seeing if we can set up something, but we're not going to dive into that. That's what they call in the business a tease.
Or I'm rewatching MacGyver from the 1980s, and the teaser part at the beginning of the episode, they actually call it the opening gambit.
The opening gambit.
Because of the way those episodes go. So we can call that our opening gambit to what might happen in the future.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and dive into the main thing of the main body of this podcast. We're just going to move along, and we're going to. I should have mentioned. I didn't mention this before, that this was a subject suggested by Terry several weeks ago. It just now remembered it. Terry, who is my wonderful editor, who did such a fantastic job on Zoe and the Finding Salvation series. So her fingerprints are all over it, and so I should say that I have been lucky enough to be the beneficiary of some wonderful editors through the Red Adept, through CC over here, through Terry. And they have all made my books better because once I get into the book, it's like, I'm really stuck in the tree portion and forget the forest. And having them point out problems with plots and having them point out problems with punctuation and pacing, it's so invaluable. We've talked a lot on this podcast about the value of editing, and we get it, that some self-published writers, some independent writers are really caught up in the need, what they feel is the necessity of self-editing. And, and that if that's a system that you feel works for you, what we are going to say here does not take away from that. you will hear us say frequently, well, you need to do this, or you should do this, and stuff like that. Please, please, please take that with a grain of salt.
Right. And self-editing is challenging. Some people can do it. You need to take a step. There we go.
There we go.
Again. You should take a step back from your writing and at least let it sit for a little while, because the book that JT is currently working on, I wrote 10 years ago. I rewrote it recently. So it's almost a completely different book than it was when it started. Going back to reread it after I had let it sit for 10 years, it was like reading somebody else's work. And that was one of the places where I started to see issues with it. And I wanted to change the story a little bit to make it work for as a lead into a series. So if you're self-editing, it is advisable, I guess maybe we would say, that you at least step back, work on something else for a while, let it rest, go back with it with fresh eyes.
And, we're not going to dwell too much on the self-editing because that's not the purpose of this, but there is one more wonderful suggestion I heard about self-editing, that if you are going to do that, and perhaps this is even if you're not self-editing, read your book out loud to yourself, so
yes.
you engage a different part of your brain, because what you process with your eyes and your ears differently. You process differently, different parts of your brain. So if you are self-editing, then read your work out loud and see what it sounds like. Does it flow? Do you find yourself making stops?
It helps you figure out where the run-on sentences are, because if you have to take a breath in a sentence, then it's probably too long. But when you bring that up, that brings to mind something else that I've been hearing recently, is that there are authors, for various reasons, who are now dictating. Dictating is becoming huge in writing. So if you are someone who dictates your writing, then when you go back to actually type it up to transcribe it, if you're dictating it and then it does it to an automatic text, you obviously have to go back, because it takes a while for it to learn your how to understand your phrases and your words, and it might misspell things, and so you definitely have to look that over. But it kind of goes both ways. If you are writing it out, typing it out, then go back and read it aloud. If you are dictating, go back and type it up.
Right.
And, because don't rely on the speech to text. It's not always accurate.
But still, try to engage the other part of your brain. Definitely
Switch
try
it
to engage
over.
the part of the brain. Okay, we're gonna leave self-editing alone now, because we have strong opinions about that, but we do not want to artificially create any barriers in you or in us about what editing works best for you. You do you, will do us. Okay, we're going to go and transition right into it. We're going to be referring to the editing blog by Louise Harnby. Harnby? Who labels herself as a crime fiction and thriller editor. Louise, thank you for posting this very informative and very thoughtful column about the types of editing. Hopefully you found our blog and our podcast through the links and everything that I'm going to be posting in there. But give credit where credit is due.
Yep.
This is this is going to be a combination of what Louise has written and our professional experience dealing with editing. Now, generally speaking, we agree that there is generally 4 types of editing. And I'm sorry, one more side note here. You notice that CC has her MacBook running. Let's see, she has PETA.
No.
Oh, wait, no.
I have Katniss.
I have PETA.
Yes.
Because Katniss is the dominant person in the relationship, sort of like the CEO of 2 more books. So you have Katniss, I have PETA, they're linked so that we can see the what we're doing here. So we're going to talk about developmental editing, which is also known in my world as content editing. We'll talk about line editing. We're going to talk about copy editing. We're going to talk about proofreading. And right from the get-go, we're going to talk about my mistakes. Because I didn't have content editors when I first started the business. Now,
that's true.
I did have a professional editor on the book that Cece just showed you, Duties Faithfully, what is it? Duties Faithfully Executed. I've written a few books and now the titles are
You should look at our books page. That's mostly him.
But I did have a professional editor where I paid several $100s to have this person do it. That person was my awesome aunt. Who
was a professional editor for one of the traditional big publishers.
Yeah.
So it's not that just a family thing. It was, but she had enough professional experience that she was able to take a step back.
Yeah,
And
so but her,
just to qualify that.
yeah, but she was one of the big 5 publishing companies. Her
Yes.
business card really said editor.
Yep.
She was a technical editor, but it's once you get hired by one of the big 5, you've hit the bigs. You're in the
Yeah.
major league. You're playing
Yeah,
major league.
she had an office near some interesting people.
Yeah, we saw. Yeah, that was
fun.
Okay, but that's all about us. Okay,
Yeah.
now back to content editing. Content editing is really so essential because it's the big dive. It's the big first dive. It has not anything to do with punctuation or spelling or anything. A content editor, or as Louise says here, developmental editing, it looks at the story as a whole. It's looking to see if it comes together, if it works, if it
Makes sense.
if it's organized well, if these events occur in a logical fashion. And this is where content editing really helped me, because I mentioned in the past that, and I got my hand gently slapped, is by both CC and my content editors, is they, flashbacks don't really work. And I love my flashbacks. It depends.
They do.
Flashbacks should be short and to the point and support the current scene. What I was doing was I was doing entire chapters, and that is part of the problem with that book.
But in the case of this one, it is the events support the flashbacks, because
it was a
the
campaign,
character, is like rethinking the choices they've made.
Right.
And that's where we have to say, you can't take everything that's put before you as just a hard and fast rule, because depending on the situation, you can't say no flashbacks, because there may be occasions, maybe somebody has PTSD.
Right.
And if they're having a PTSD flashback, that is actually a physical event that's happening to the person, to the character.
So not to dwell on it, but as an example, I was not using flashbacks effectively in some of my books. And so it was pointed out to me that it would be better to do things in sequence and make them more effective. And, here we are. So I've tried to cut down the use of flashbacks as a tool.
That actually, so if you don't want to do something in flashback, just, for the sake of argument here, maybe start your story in a different spot. That's where, if you're looking at the developmental aspect of your story, maybe you didn't start the story in the right place if you need to revisit something that happened in the past.
Content editing also deals with POV. And sometimes writers inadvertently break the fourth wall, especially if it's from a first person. The biggest thing that I see in other people's writing is that the main character, who's the main POV, first person, point of view, they read other people's minds. And it's like, no, you can't read other people's minds. You can't. You don't know what people are thinking. You can see. You can pick up clues. Pardon me.
You can speculate, and
you can speculate, but you can pick up clues from the face-to-face communication, body language. But the mistake that I see is reading people's minds, and that you can't do that in first-person POV.
Didn't you mention reading a book recently where it was kind of like from sentence to sentence or paragraph to paragraph, it was shifting perspectives?
Yeah, the shifting perspectives,
like within...
paragraph to paragraph, and it's like, that for me, that takes the reader out of the story.
Yeah.
That's what you want to do, is you want to keep the reader in the story, so you can't be, here we go again. Depending on your writer's style, you have to be careful about doing that. And other issues that content editing will pick up is, of course, make sure your characters remain consistent, that they don't have a sudden personality shift or gender shift or something like that.
Well, and I don't know about the gender shift. If there is a major personality shift, you need to sprinkle in enough clues to make it reasonable that this could happen to the person. Like if you start out with a villain at the beginning of the book who redeems himself at the end, you have to kind of sprinkle things along the way, showing that this person really learned something and became a better person, and not just out of the blue decided, hey, look at me, I'm all fixed.
Yeah.
Because the readers don't like that.
The readers don't want. Readers are, your partners in your book.
Mm-hmm.
They want to be taken away by the story. They want to be taken away by the characters. They want to be, I don't want to be swept away, but they want to be in the book. And so what your content editor is your main ally in making sure that your story is readable and that your readers stay in the story. And I've not been a content editor myself, but I would assume that what content editors are trying to do is trying to find landmines that blow up and take your readers out and make your readers sit back and say, oh, that's just bullshit. That's no way that's going to happen.
And not everyone can afford to go through the full editing process, and the content editing can be quite in-depth. So if you are unable to do that, find a critique group.
Mm-hmm.
Find a group of people, sit down, they usually will exchange chapters, and they'll help you find these landmines as you're going along.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's not really financially feasible for you, because it's very expensive to get all this done, we understand that. But definitely find critique groups, find a critique partner, find someone you trust to give you reasonable feedback and not to break your spirit while you're trying to write this book, because it's hard enough. But if you find a reasonable critique group, then you go to a formal editing process that you pay for. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, if you do bypass this very intense part of the editing package, you'll at least have probably avoided some of these issues.
Yeah, this is a big lift. The content editing is probably the big lift of all the editing phases, because, they're looking at the big picture story. And then they're making sure that the individual chapters, the individual pieces, the individual characters, the individual events are, woven well into the tapestry of your book. And I'm mixing metaphors, and I apologize for that. But it's the point I'm trying to make is the content editing is the big lift. It is, if you can't have anything else, it's really in your best interest to have a content editing. But there are caveats always. For instance, content editing is not designed for punctuation. It's not for that kind of thing. It's not for the, sentence level editing, commas, periods, and so on, those kind of things.
And you mentioned that you've never done content editing. I've never done any real professional editing.
No. I've had content. I didn't start out doing content editing.
No, but I think you were saying that you had not done it on other
Oh, I had
people's.
not done it myself.
So,
yes, you're right.
So when we talk about editors having different strengths, basically, I am not really an editor. I am a proofreader.
Right. And we're going to get to those.
And I you definitely, I know editing services, they will assign different people to different parts of your editing package. So usually when you go to an editorial company like Red Adept, they have multiple people on staff who look through your manuscript. So you're getting a person who has a specific skill set for a specific level of editing. So it's a very valuable service to get.
Right. So that, which transitions us to the next one, and it's line editing. I always get three. There's more there. You notice that we said there was four, but I always get three. I always get content editing, I always get line editing, I always get proofreading. And that's just personal preference. Because my editors will not agree with this, but I know how to put together a sentence. Anyway.
I think you do.
Okay, but line editing is what is the next natural.
Yeah.
Is the next natural step in the editing process, because then it gets to, we've talked about the story. So we've talked about the house. Now we need to talk about the bricks that built the house, and that's the sentence. And a badly placed brick, askewed, or a badly fired brick, which is not formed correctly, in the bad place of a chapter, paragraph, chapter, story, could blow up your house. I'm really stretching on the metaphor here.
What you're trying to get at is, if you're building an arch, a stone arch, you need a keystone.
Right.
The keystone holds the arch in place.
Right.
If you don't have the keystone in the right place, the arch is going to fall down.
And that's kind of what line editing is, because what line editing does is the editor starts to look at the individual sentences to make sure that they provide that your that's your style of writing. What they're trying to do is they're looking at your style of writing, and that your style of writing is consistent through your book, and that that your word choices and your metaphors and your sentence pace and your choice of prose are consistent. They make sense, and they appeal to the reader. Like that could be a struggle because for some people, because we don't write in a day, so sometimes we don't stick with the same writing style in a day. We shift as the story develops.
That's true.
Over the weeks it takes to write a story.
It's true.
So line editing is basically trying to make sure that there's some consistency in across the book. From the narration, from the viewpoint. There's just general consistency and especially in style.
And this is where I think you need to have the appropriate sentence structure. You need to vary your sentence length. You need to vary your paragraph length, things like that. But this is where it can get a little hazy, because if you're doing something like dialogue, it may not always be a proper sentence with the subject, predicate, whatever, because people don't speak the way they write. So it can be very tricky to make sure, and it does mention here dialogue and how it conveys voice, mood, and intention. So your dialogue will not always match the rest of your writing. What you said is a very good point, that we change from day to day, and our writing changes from day to day. Your character and their dialogue has to be true to the character and not necessarily true to the rest of the story, because they're two different things. So finding the differences is very important, those nuances, and an excellent editor will know that and will not, come back at you and say, hey, this sentence is wrong, when it's a piece of dialogue. And it's like, well, it was never meant to be a proper sentence, because, that's not how we talk.
No, and then, and so what's that big difference between that and copy editing, which is the next one? The copy editing is just really, now we're diving into the
nuts and bolts.
Nuts and bolts of grammar. It's just really diving into the nuts and bolts of grammar. I mean, it's just making sure that, it's your sentences and your words and your commas. Well,
this even mentions document formatting. Which...
Yeah, it's really. But these are important, and I think this is a good thing to point out is when you give your editors your copy, you should say your manuscript. You should make it as close to final as you can make it. As final as you can make it. So if you have weird formatting or anything like that, then what you're telling the editor, and I'm weird paragraph formatting, or this is what you're telling your editor, this is what I want it to look like in print. So what you're trying to do is you want to give them a print final copy. And so copy editing is just real nuts and bolts. Your copy editor is just going to be looking at every single sentence and just going through one by one to make sure that your nouns and your paragraph spacing, things like that are all good.
And looking at things like overuse of those adjectives, adverbs, things like that, the ones that you don't really need in there. This is where I know that you go through and you have your list of words that we all tend to write in there. We have writing tics, just like we have nervous tics. And you may throw things, one of the things that I do is say so all the time, like so, S-O. And if I'm writing that, then I'm going to go through and just do a find, find this and see how many times it's in there. It may be useful in some places, but you probably want to get rid of most of that. And that's what your copy editor will be doing. They'll be pointing out where you're using or overusing certain words.
Yeah. And then finally is the proofreading. And this is, I just mentioned a moment ago about, giving your editor what you feel is the final copy. What your proofreader is going to give back to you is what, the final copy. This is with all the previous edits have all been done. And, we forgot to mention an important point, is that as it goes through each stage of the editing, you're going to get back your manuscript. So it's not going to go through all the stages and then they're going to give it back to you.
Nope.
That's not how it works. What it is it's going to go through the copy edit, they'll give it back to you. Then they'll give it back to you like, they're going to give it, you're going to get it back and forth. So you'll have to fix things along the way, or you'll have to explain things. And but you're going to get it back, so it's going to be boom, 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 boom. Okay.
So what JT is basically saying here is that, especially if you're a first-time writer watching this, your editor is not there to change your manuscript. They will make suggestions. Usually, if you're using something like Word, they can do the notations along the sides.
Google does that too.
And your editor will make comments that this sentence doesn't make sense. What are you trying to say here? Do you really want to use this word here? And you have to make those decisions yourself and make those changes. So a good editor does not go in and change your document. A good editor suggests the changes you need to make and allows you to make the choices so that it's true to your writing style and true to your voice. And that's why they do the back and forth, because you get through one round, you go back and fix whatever you feel needs to be fixed based on what the editor has suggested.
Right.
And then you send it to the next round of edits. So it's still your document. They're not changing your document.
Right. And Louise makes a very good point here. Getting back to proofreading just very quickly here is proofreading is generally considered the last step, but it's generally considered the QC step.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is the last quality control in theory. In practice may turn out different, but
Right.
Proofreading is generally the quality control step before the can of tomatoes go out the door to be published, basically. So proofreading is generally considered the last chance to catch all the typos, catch the misspellings, catch the structure, and things like that. But you can see just from our discussing these 4 stages that they each have their own area of specialization.
Mm-hmm.
What it boils down to, like it or not, is the person's name who's on the cover. You can have you can have a squadron of editors.
Mm-hmm.
But the person's name that's on the book is responsible for it from cover to cover.
The buck stops here.
Yeah, so you cannot shift blame. You cannot push blame. You cannot point fingers at your editors when something sneaks through, and something always sneaks through. Regardless, you can.
Mm-hmm.
It always happens. We've told the story many times. Not going to repeat it, but professional editors will tell you. Even from the Big 5 publishing houses, something always sneaks through. It is not the editor's responsibility. They will do the job. Every editor I've had been very conscientious about it. They've done their absolute best work. But when it boils at the end of the day, hate that metaphor, but at the end of the day, your name is on the cover. You're responsible for it, so it's your book. Congratulations.
And some of that can be when you're shifting manuscripts back and forth, you have to be very careful with version control of your manuscripts.
Mm-hmm.
So if you keep multiple copies of your manuscript on your computer and you accidentally publish the copy that was mainly your first draft,
Mm-hmm.
that's on you, because you probably don't want to keep those older copies around just in case, but it can happen. It has happened where people, maybe they lost a file and it's like, oh, well, this one is fine, so they grab that one instead, and it was version 1. And then your book is an absolute mess and you're getting atrocious reviews.
Yeah, we could probably devote a podcast to version control and document control.
Yeah.
But the main point is your book, your responsibility, and and as I think I posted on social media a couple of weeks ago, your book is you. It's you. Because writing a book is a private endeavor done in the public spotlight, and so you are revealing yourself. You're revealing, whether you like it or not, you're revealing your personality, your tendencies, your prejudices, by the way that you shape characters, and it comes through. So it's a private endeavor done in a spotlight, in a bright spotlight, and how you can smooth that process through the effective use of excellent editors going through the processes. At the very least, if you are tight on the money, we strongly recommend getting the content editor.
Or find a critique group.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can at least get a critique group to get fresh eyes on your manuscript, they usually don't charge, or you might have to pay a membership fee. It will be less expensive than editing, and it won't be quite as professional, but at least you're not sending out something that nobody's looked at.
Right.
And another important thing we should say is that you need to find an editorial service that you can work with.
Right.
If you don't mesh, find someone else, because it's a stressful enough process already. You need somebody that you can feel comfortable working with.
Editors are people, and
Yep.
they are different people depending on it. For instance, and this is an excellent example, a romance editing service is going to treat your book differently than a science fiction romance editing service is.
Right.
And also, even if you are working within genres, if you find an editor that, then we're going to do content editing, you may find a content editor that you just can't mesh with. I heard a horror story the other day where a self-published writer got all this feedback from their content editor onto their books, and when they incorporated that feedback into the book and sent it back to the content editor weeks later, because it can be weeks later, the content editor had said, no, it worked better the other way, and it's like, what?
And you've wasted all that time. It's like
but I don't know if it was a waste of time, because it helps the writer
right.
incorporate that second view into their book. So I'm not so sure it was a waste of time, but still, it's like that's like fingernails down the chalkboard to me.
I think that's a little dubious, and I would second guess working with that editor, because if they have that dramatic a shift where they make a massive amount of suggestions from what you mentioned, that the person basically did a lot of rewriting of this work, and then all of a sudden the editor comes back and says, no, go back to what you had. It's like, well, here's where version control comes in handy, because if you do have that previous one, but it is a lot of work to make those editorial changes. So I would be, if that's okay with you, then that's fine to work with them, but I would hesitate to work with somebody like that.
And the other thing I need to hesitate on, and this is what we're doing right now, is having a family member or loved one doing your editing. Now, I'm going through and I'm making changes I'm making suggestions to CC's book, but once I've turned it back to her and she's made all her changes, she's still going to pay for another content editor.
Yep.
So this, we're not saying that I am the content editor for this book. I am not, by any stretch of the imagination. Although I admit I have learned things from my content editors. I am definitely a different writer than I used to be from them, which is maybe the most important thing. But what I've learned from Terry and the folks at Red Adept, I'm applying those lessons to what I'm doing for CC. But someone who's known you for years, and I don't want to use the word intimately, but you're close to them emotionally, it might be a better way to say this. They are going to be thinking about your feelings, and they're going to be thinking about, for good or bad. And it's a struggle for that person, and it is a huge lift to ask that person to do the editing. And that's not a message, because I'm glad to do that. I'm not sending a message.
I've read your stuff too and made suggestions. Yeah. I think what JT is saying here, that for many years I've had a very thin skin, and this is something you really have to keep in mind with the editing process. I've gotten over it through working out in the greater world and having to, you have to collaborate on so many things, and you cannot have a thin skin. So in the past, when I was still at home, not really interacting with the public much, if JT read my stuff and made a comment, I would break down in tears. It wasn't your fault, it was me. So I think you still have some hesitation for my emotional state based on, I have gotten much better. You will admit that.
Yeah, she hasn't seen what I'm doing.
Well, but I understand that these things need to be done to make it a better book, a better story. And I understand your hesitation. And JT can be very blunt, which is fine. I think JT knows to temper it around me, because we've learned over the years how to communicate with each other. That doesn't work for a lot of couples. And actually, I've had people comment that, it must be fun to work with your spouse like this. It's fun, but it can also be a challenge. So, we've been married for 42 years, and we've learned how to work with each other to try not to set each other off too much, especially as we do projects like this, because it can be, this is your baby, and you don't want people to, say your baby, look at the cowlick on your baby. Can't you do something about the cowlick?
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see in a week. We'll be
and
back.
We will probably come back and revisit that. But I think what JT is saying overall is that if you are very close to someone and you have them read your work and edit your work and make comments on your work, you have to be careful, because that person may not have given you honest feedback in order to save your feelings.
Yeah, and that is a landmine where you have to tread carefully. I think that we've gone through, and I think we've illustrated these fair points. And as I said, we fell into the habit of saying you need to or you should. Really, the life that you live is your life. The book that you write is your book. You're responsible for it. You do you. What we're doing is we took Louise's book column here, excellent column on editing.
It's very good.
And said, Louise Harnby, I guess. And we said when we applied it to our own experiences, and we hope that we've done her justice, and we hope that we've done our experience justice. But again, you do you. You have to go out your book has to go out in the world, and it has to be your book represents you, and so it has to be the best representative of you. So what we wish you well.
I think what it boils down to is you have to put out what you feel comfortable putting out. And what we're trying to do, especially if you're a new writer and you're trying to figure out how to do things, there's so much advice out there. We're hoping we can break it down to a point where you're not quite as overwhelmed when you're looking at things that you might consider doing during your writing process. So editing can be a very intimidating process. So again, find an editor you can work with that you're comfortable with. Try to get at least one round if you can afford it. If not, go to a critique group, work with other people, because writers are happy to share each other's work, and it does help both the writing process, but it helps you financially, because if you're doing a critique group, it's much less expensive. But if you can get a formal editing service, that will probably give you the best outcome of your book.
Yeah, and since I learned my lesson with a book where I did a really crappy job of self-editing, and since that time I've used an editing service, multiple editors, and I have received compliments on how technically clean my books are. So, so it's there's that peace of mind thing also. So you do what you need to do to achieve peace of your mind, and and good luck. Really, it's good luck. Okay. Any last thoughts? Because we really, as you can tell from the timer there, we've been going for a while.
We've been blathering. I will say though that independent publishing had a stigma attached to it for a very long time, because people could not afford to get the proper round of editing, and some people didn't even care. They just wanted to put something out there and make money. So if you've heard that there is a stigma against independent publishing, that is part of the reason. The copies were not clean. And things happen even if you get editing, but I think some of that stigma is gone now, because independent authors have become so much more aware, or at least the reliable ones, the people who are not trying to make a quick buck, are realizing that you do need to put the time and effort in to make the best product possible.
Yep. Okay. So if you have any feedback, did we hit anything, did we miss anything? Did we miss anything? So feel free to reach out to us through our website. And here comes the commercial. You can find this podcast and other podcasts like it. You can find our books. You can find our company store. You can okay. Through our website at www.carsonhume.com. Technical reminder: this is going up on YouTube, but not TikTok, because it's so volatile. We don't know what's happening day to day.
Yes.
And through our website, through both our websites, actually through 3 websites, you can reach out to us and say, hey, you guys are so full of it. This is what you forgot to mention, or this is what you should talk about, or, I'm going to do whatever I want kind of thing.
And you are always free to do whatever you want. That's not the point. But if you want to ask us any questions, if you think there's something we missed, if there's something that we said that brought up another question, please let us know.
Okay, one last quickie is Zoe is out there for pre-sale on the 5 platforms. The e-copy is for 99 cents. If you want to get that out there, it'll be released on last day of February 28th. It hasn't gotten a lot of love out there. It hasn't got a lot of visibility, but that's okay. That's independent publishing. 5 years from now, this is going to be a freaking bestseller. You just watch.
There will be a movie.
Yeah, something amazing. Anyway, over there's CC.
And over there's JT.
Thank you for putting up with us. Thank you for being you, and you all have a very wonderful week. Anyway, and enjoy that Super Bowl if you observe that religious holiday. Go team. Go sports.
Bye-bye.
Bye.